Okay, so it is 6 o'clock. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight to learn more about your Fulton County property tax assessment and the process to appeal with Representatives Carrie and Stacy from Atlanta Legal Aid. My name is Jen Tremont, and I am the program manager for the Atlanta Beltline Partnership, and I will help facilitate tonight's meeting. Before we begin, just a couple of house rules that I'm sure everyone's familiar with at this point. Please make sure to keep yourselves on mute throughout the entire session. If you have a question, please enter it into the chat feature on Zoom or into the comment section if you're joining us on Facebook Live. We'll try our best to get through all of the questions, but if for whatever reason we don't, or you are joining us by phone, do not hesitate to reach out and we'll try to answer your question. We will also be sending out a recording of tonight's session probably tomorrow, and we will also be sending out registration links for free consultation appointments with one of our volunteers to help you with the appeal process should you decide to do so. So without further ado, I will turn it over to the Executive Director of Atlanta Beltline Partnership, Rob Bronner, for a brief introduction about tonight's program.
Thank you, Jen. And thank you everybody for joining us this evening. Before we get started, I just want to, I know these are very challenging times and that everybody has a lot weighing heavily on their mind. And before we start, I want to acknowledge the pain and the hurt and the anger caused by, really the tragic, cruel murders of many Black men and women, and also lift up the courage and the resolve of everyone who has been protesting for racial justice. We at the Beltline Partnership, we're with you. We are trying to be part of positive change. This session tonight is a very, very small piece of that. And I know that the last thing that anybody really wants to have to think about right now is your property tax assessment. But I do hope that the information you receive tonight will be helpful to you amid everything else that's going on. Again, my name is Rob Bronner. I'm the Executive Director of the Atlanta Beltline Partnership. We are the nonprofit entity that supports the vision of the Beltline, and we do that in three ways. We enable the project by raising philanthropic funds that are used to help implement the Beltline. When it is safe to do so, we engage the public through programs like tours, free fitness classes, and Adopt the Beltline that teach people about the project, that activate the parks and trails, and that mobilize volunteers. And we do look forward to the time when COVID is behind us and we can do that again safely. And then we also empower residents through programs like tonight's Home Empowerment Workshop. And that's really done in a way that connects people with the partners and the resources to help you live and to work and to thrive along the Beltline. We believe that the Beltline brings a lot of positive health, economic, and transportation benefits to the neighborhoods it connects. But we also know that as investments are made in communities, the price of housing goes up. And both renters and homeowners can feel that they're being pushed out as a result. And we understand that these financial pressures may be felt more severely now than ever due to a lot of the negative impacts of COVID-19. And so, we want you to be able to be secure in your home and to be able to remain in your community. And we are grateful that funding from Wells Fargo and Bank of America has enabled us to have these workshops throughout the year to connect Beltline residents with the partners and with the resources to help you stay in your home. All right? We want you to be able to live, to work, and to thrive along the Beltline. And my one request this evening for all of you on the call is, if you find this workshop to be helpful, please, please, please tell your neighbors and tell anyone else who you think could benefit from this information and help us get the word out. As Jen said, there's going to be a link that you'll get tomorrow, and please forward it on if you find this information to be helpful. We are blessed in the work that we do to do it in partnership with a lot of really wonderful organizations, and particularly for these home empowerment workshops, partners we work with, they are the experts. And it is my pleasure to introduce Stacy Reynolds, who is a staff attorney with Atlanta Legal Aid, and she and Carrie will lead tonight's presentation. So thank you again for being here.
Hi, thank you very much. And thank you to the Atlanta Beltline Partnership for having us. Again, my name is Stacy Reynolds. I'm an attorney at Atlanta Legal Aid, and I also have Carrie Hipp that's going to be joining us to help me with doing the presentation. I am going to quickly share my screen. And, oh, there it is. Okay, sorry. There we go. Okay, so again, I'm Stacey Reynolds. I've got Carrie Hipp. Also, we're going to be sort of tag teaming through this, and she's going to chime in when there's something to add. We're here to talk about the property tax appeals, and the reason for that is that, as many of you know, the property taxes can be the difference between being able to afford your home and not afford it. And so trying to keep those down and as much as we can is really important. As the market increases, as you've already heard, that affects the property taxes, because what they're looking at is trying to get at the fair market value. So we want to try and do what we can to try and keep that down. And the reason that ends up having a big impact on homeowners is that if you can't pay the property taxes, then you can't pay your mortgage. You know, the mortgage is paying your property taxes, and as part of your mortgage. If the amount goes up, then the following year you're going to get hit with a shortage on your property tax, which can lead to not only an increase in your mortgage payment, but also it'll jump where you have to try and make up for last year, and so it just sort of springboards into something that's worse if you don't try and get it on top of it early. If you don't have a mortgage, then it can lead to tax liens, or if your mortgage company isn't paying your taxes, it can lead to tax liens and tax foreclosures. And then in the same way that we're here trying to help people manage this issue, there are a lot of people out there that are plotting predatory practices to try and use this as a way to get your equity or to get your home. So we want to try and keep that from happening. We want to try and make sure that legacy homeowners are able to keep their homes if we can. So there are two main ways that we talk about for trying to reduce your property taxes. One is homestead exemptions and the other is appeals. We tend to talk about them in different times of the year, because for homestead exemptions, the timeline for that is to try and get it filed by April 1st. April 1st is the deadline for applying for homestead exemptions for the current year. You can apply for homestead exemptions at any time. So if you're not getting something right now, you can go ahead and apply for it, but it's not going to go into effect until next year. And the really horrible thing is that, of course, this year, April 1st fell in the middle of everything being shut down. And so really the only way to apply towards the end of that period was to do it online. And so I think there are a lot of people that got sort of hurt by that. The appeals are really what we're in now and then moving forward. So that it's kind of the rest of the tax year. So it starts with when you get your notice of assessment, which this year was on June 19th, or when it's made available. And then they have 45 days from the day it's made available to appeal. So that, again, this year, the deadline is going to be August 3rd. At the end of that August 3rd deadline, you can no longer appeal. And as you can see from this timeline, the next step in our timeline is the tax bills come out. So by the time the tax bills come out, it is too late to appeal. So, once you get that bill that you're going to have to pay, you're going to have to pay it, and there's nothing really you can do to get it down. So you want to try and take advantage of doing the appeals now. Then during the rest of the year, they're going to be processing the appeals. The Board of Assessor will check the appeals, decide if they want to accept your value, suggest a different value, or pass it on to the Board of Equalization. And then you have the right to appeal and get it onto the Board of Equalization, which is the final stop on our tax year. The Board of Equalization is basically just 3 taxpayers who are hired to listen to these tax appeals. So they're people just like you. They can be very reasonable. Their job is to try and figure out what the fair market value should be for your property. And it's a very informal hearing. In the past, it's actually been a very, about 5 or 6 people in a very small room. We don't know what they're going to be doing going forward, because that's not going to be good for social distancing. So hopefully they'll find a bigger space and be able to maintain that. But it's not a real formal thing. And so the advantage of getting to that stage is that once you get to the Board of Equalization, you actually get a 3-year freeze. So even if you lose on this tax appeal, even if they end up saying, well, no, we're going to stick with the value that was originally put in, the worst case scenario is it doesn't go up next year or the year after. So, you know, in a way you win even if you lose. So we think it's worth at least trying to appeal it and seeing how it goes. You can also appeal every 3 years and see if you can kind of keep it down that way. So just a quick little blip on exemptions. I just want to put in a plug, first of all, that if you don't have a homestead exemption, you are entitled to a homestead exemption for the home where you live, if you own it, or have a bona fide claim to ownership. The basic exemption is going to, Fulton and Atlanta get you a $30,000 basic exemption. They deduct that from the taxable value. It also gets you a floating exemption, which can be a huge savings. The public schools doesn't have that floating exemption, but it does have almost a $50,000 value that they deduct from the value as long as there's at least $10,000 to pay taxes on. But you also want to think about as the life events happen, there are some additional exemptions that can actually save you even more money on your property taxes. So as you age, at 62, 65, and 70, there are additional exemptions. Also, people who are disabled can qualify for those senior exemptions at a younger age. And with all of those, there are some income restrictions on how much income you can have, but a lot of income doesn't get counted into that. So it's worth at least trying to apply for them. And as life events happen, going back and checking to see, if your income goes down, or if you retire and the only income you have is Social Security and retirement income, most of that isn't going to count in the income limits. So it's worth going back and checking to see if you're eligible for these exemptions as you get older and things change. There are also some for disabled veterans and the unmarried surviving spouse or minor children of disabled veterans, and the unmarried spouses of U.S. service members, peace officers, and firefighters who are killed on the line of duty. Those are all things to keep in mind. Now, and especially I want to talk about the floating exemption, because I think a lot of you have probably heard the term value cap. Well, the value cap actually is the same as the floating exemption. I had to do the math to confirm that, because it doesn't look the same when you look at your tax bill. But the value, what they do is they figure out, once you have that, you lock in that value, and it can only go up to 2.5% to 3% per year. And so that's going to dramatically reduce the effect of these skyrocketing values. But it's still important to keep an eye on the values, because this does not apply to all your categories of taxes. For example, the Atlanta City school taxes don't have a floating exemption. The bonds typically don't have most of the exemptions. So you still have to be worried about that, the ultimate value that they're saying, because it's going to impact your taxes on those categories. I was talking to a client just last week that, when she got her assessment, she locked in at a really good value on the value cap, but because it didn't protect her on the school taxes, she ended up owing, or the estimated taxes are going to be almost $2,000 more just based on that increase. Everything else stayed the same. So, it can make a huge difference to your bottom line, whether you appeal or not. So I'll turn it over to Carrie for the next set.
Thanks, Stacy. Hi, my name's Carrie Hipp. I'm the Pro Bono Director at Atlanta Legal Aid Society. Just as a reminder, what we do at Atlanta Legal Aid is provide direct representation and also things like this, sometimes some general public education to people in our community. We focus our representation on people who are low income, and we do things like some of these tax appeals sometimes. So if you get confused with these appeals and you think you might qualify, go ahead and look us up, atlantalegalaid.org, and you can apply for our services. So let's get into the tax assessments. They are available now, so you can look yours up online if you haven't yet gotten them in the mail. I know I've had clients who have gotten them. And the way to do that is just go to fultonassessor.org. This is what you see pop up. And then there's little quick links, and you click to the quick links and it'll go to a property search page, and you can search by your name. You can search by your property address. One thing that you need to keep in mind, let's say you live on a street that's like McNabb or something. Sometimes for some reason, these records have an extra space somewhere in them. And if you can't find your property that way, just be a little creative about how you search with fewer things. Like maybe just look up the street name and not the number, and you should be able to find it. And when you access it that way, you'll be able to pull up your notice. Once you look it up, on the right-hand side, there's a place to download the 2020 notice. It worked for me. I did that for a few people, and it downloaded just fine and opened for me as a PDF document. And then you'll be able to see it. This is also what you get in the mail. It's the same document. It should look the same. And so when you look at this document, what you see, and hopefully this is pretty big for you so you can see on the screen. The first thing that you kind of look at the top, one of the big things is the notice of assessment date and also the appeal deadline. So the notice of assessment date is 6/19. The appeal deadline is in August. Okay, so moving down, some of the other information that you can see, the circled part right there is homestead exemptions. So if you're not sure whether you applied or you think you should still have one, if you don't see anything there, step one is to call the tax office and ask them if they see it there. Occasionally, we'll see people who have applied for it and for some reason it's not showing up in the computer, and we usually just tell them to go ahead and appeal just to make sure that's on there. But you'll be able to see any exemptions. And then also—
one thing on that, just if somebody has filed for their exemptions, again, because of the whole COVID-19 thing, a lot of those are still in process. I would still say, unless you can get confirmation that you actually do have that exemption, I would go ahead and appeal it. And then you can withdraw the appeal later if it gets processed and you can see it.
Yeah, and there's not a penalty for withdrawing your appeal later. That's just kind of making sure that in case they did mess up and they're not showing it, that you've got that. Okay, so you see all the basic information. It's got an account number, it's got the property ID number, and that is one thing that you'll want to keep an eye on. You can look up your property by that property ID number. You'll also need that when you go file things for it. And then the next thing that we have circled is the big thing. What's the current market value? What are they claiming the market value of your property is? And the confusing thing about this is that you see there's 100% appraised value and 40% assessed value. Why? What does that mean? So the 100% appraised value is basically what they're claiming the market value is of the property. So like what it would sell at right now, what they're appraising it at in full. So if you're like, my house is worth about $300,000, maybe that would be around $300,000. So below it, what's 40% of that number? And that's what you see as the assessed value. And the purpose of having that assessed value is that is what they use to determine the tax amounts. So you see below in that big box down there, you see some exemptions and you see the taxable amount. And what they will multiply that millage rate by and what they will subtract the exemptions from is in fact that 40% assessed value. So that's why those are important. And so when you're appealing something, you're either appealing that homestead thing, which is circled, or you're appealing the current year market value. And let me see if there's anything else on there. One other thing that you'll want to pay attention to, you see it lists acreage in that center block as well, is also the neighborhood number. You're gonna need to know that for later on when we talk about doing your own research into other similar properties. That neighborhood number is actually pretty important because part of the way that they determine what the value of your home is what neighborhood you're in. Okay. So, yep. And then the very bottom is estimated tax. So you notice that it says this is not a bill. It says estimated tax. That's because in that far column that says millage, that millage rate is last year's millage rate. They are going to determine new millage rates for this year. Chances are it's not going to be crazy different from that amount, that total estimated tax amount, but they're just giving you an estimate. So it won't be right on the money probably. They're probably going to change something else. Someone asked, where's neighborhood number listed? Stacy, can you like hover your, perfect. Stacy's hovering her arrow around it. It says MBHD 1476 for this example. So that's the neighborhood number.
We'll also talk about it when we're looking at the computer screens that you'll use to search. So you can also find it, you know, a little bit later in the process.
Absolutely. And so I talked about homestead earlier on, and this one says like, yes, HF01, which is a typical normal homestead exemption. And in that bottom box, you can also see how much your homestead exemption is being valued at. So for this person, it's that third column at the bottom. So it gives you a good idea of it, but like I said, it's an estimate, so it's not going to be exactly the same when you get the bill. Someone just asked, and I'm going to go ahead and say, do you have to apply for homestead exemption every year? Not usually, no, not every year. But, and I don't think we're not really going into homestead exemption, so I'll just do this briefly, and Stacy, feel free to jump in, because Stacy's done a lot of homestead exemption work. Generally, you just apply for it, and it carries through every year. You just need to apply before the deadline for that year. Our deadline was earlier this year, as Stacy mentioned, so that deadline's already passed. So if you applied right now for homestead exemption, it would apply to next year's. Now there are some specialty homestead exemptions, and you have to show proof of certain things for those, like your age. And sometimes if you move up an age bracket, you will need to refile under that, right, Stacy?
Yeah, so each of the additional exemptions, you have to file for once you're eligible for them. If you don't file for any of the exemptions, then you waive your right to get those. So you need to file for them as soon as you get eligible and keep filing as you move into other categories. So then they'll stay in place. There is one exception to that. There is one senior freeze that actually gets, it's a 2-year freeze in Fulton County. And so that one has to be reapplied for every 2 years. And you have to keep an eye out to make sure that if you have that one, that you're on top of it, because sometimes they will come back and take out all your exemptions, which I don't think they should do. But that's the only one that you have to reapply for.
And more on the homestead exemption. So like I said before, we've got that circled exemption status on the screen. And then also you can see the numbers for the homestead exempt in the bottom block. The third column is homestead exempt. And then also, I'll just go ahead and answer some of the homestead exemption questions right now, because I feel like it makes sense. Yeah. So how can you tell if you got certain exemptions? So you can log into the Fulton Assessor website and see if it tells you, but generally what they show you are numbers and letters.
They actually, the Fulton Assessor's website right now doesn't show homestead exemption at all. I don't know why. They have a place there for it, but they took those codes out.
Okay.
And so far I haven't seen them put them back in. So I think you need to look at your assessment notice. And if you can't decipher the codes, then you can call the assessor's office and ask them, what is this code? Is this really what I should be getting? Should I be getting more? And see if there's something that you need to feel.
Yeah, that's honestly the easiest way to do it, is sometimes just calling them and saying, what do you see in your system? What exemptions am I getting? And they're usually pretty friendly when you call them and ask those sorts of questions. They should be able to access that information quickly too. And another person asked, how are appraised values determined by Fulton County? Stacy, do you want to answer that question? You probably have a better understanding than I do.
So they use a computer program to model what they think the value should be. And so it's generally based on kind of market and neighborhood, and what the sales in that neighborhood are. They're going to rely very heavily on the 2019 sales and what the computer says. Now the computer doesn't go into your home and look and see what the conditions are, so that's why there's it's just not always right, and that's why there's often things that you can argue to try and appeal the value that the computer spits out.
And I do not know what computer program they use. I don't know. And then someone also asked, if you own land under an LLC, can you get homestead?
No, a homestead exemption is only for an individual who owns the home and lives in it. And I don't want to get too weighed down in homestead exemption right now, because we have a lot to cover on just
That was the
appeals, and that's
last
the time part.
Yeah, that was the last homestead exemption question we had. And then someone asked how could it have doubled? We're going to get more into that when we get into like some of the proof part, the evidence part. But basically, when they see neighborhoods have like new construction, beltline neighborhoods, those sorts of things, they might decide that those neighborhoods have gone up in value, and sometimes it's a dramatic increase. So some of you are going to see dramatic increases. Some of you won't be seeing those right now.
Carrie and Stacy, we did have another question asking about the freeze. Do you want me to wait to ask that, or go ahead? Or can just ask it.
Stacy?
I'm sorry, are you talking about the
What kind of, which
cap
freeze?
or the,
You may be getting into it later, but we'll go ahead and ask it maybe as a preemptive. So someone is asking if they should appeal if they bought their home last fall and the purchase price significantly dropped the assessed value, so that way they get the freeze.
So actually, I think there were a number of questions from the pre-registered people about new homeowners, and so maybe it's worth just throwing that out here right now. So with a home purchase, they are supposed to do the year after the purchase. They're supposed to rely on the value of that purchase, unless it was of related parties or a nominal value sale. They should allow that as the value. So if you bought your house last year and they're showing a value of higher than what you paid for the house on the open market, then you can appeal that and just show your purchase documents to show that you should be eligible to have it lower to what you paid for it.
Yeah, so you've actually got really good evidence, and we'll be talking about evidence a little later.
Yeah, and then for people who have bought their homes this year, technically that doesn't happen until next year. I think you could still appeal it this year, but you're going to have a hard time if you're trying to argue for a value lower than what you paid for it. It may be a little harder to argue that, but you still have the right to appeal it.
Right. Okay, Stacy. Well, I think we can move on to the next slide. Okay, great. So like we mentioned, there's a certain period for the appeal, and you've got to appeal within that period, 45 days. And it begins when the assessments are made available, which they have been made available. So the deadline is now August 3rd. So that is the deadline. Put that in your calendar. You can file your appeal as soon as you want to, too. There's not like an early date start. Once that has been released, the property assessment has been released, you can file your appeal. Like we said, review your notice of assessment, and then just consider whether an argument could be made for an appeal. And that is where we're going to talk about grounds for appealing.
And that's me. It helps if I unmute when I do that. So grounds for appeal, there are 3 grounds for appeal. That's value, uniformity, and exemption denied. Exemption denied is pretty obvious. If you applied for an exemption, or if you had an exemption previously and it's not showing up now, you can appeal that because that exemption was denied. And again, if there's any question, if you think that they may still be processing it, I would say go ahead and get your appeal in, and then withdraw it later if it turns out that that they do process it and have it correct. The value and uniformity both have to do with what the appraised value of the home is, but they're different arguments. So value is looking at why your value should be different. One basis for that is to argue that the property information that they have is not correct. If the information they have would make it a more, a more valuable house, like it's got more bedrooms, more bathrooms, more square footage, things that are going to make it better and more expensive, then you can challenge that and get the value reduced based on that incorrect information. The second concept for the value appeal is that the value is too high based on the recent sales. Now, recent sales are only going to be looking at last year, so they're only going to be looking at 2019. They're going to be assuming that the value as of January 1st is the value that they're appraising it at. So what that means is that anything that, any downturn in the market that's happened this year as a result of the pandemic, that is not going to affect the values for this year. That's going to go into next year. And so you're only going to be looking at the sales that happened in 2019. And what you want to do is you want to look for sales that would support an argument for a lower value. You can cherry pick, you know, there are going to be sales that obviously are going to be higher, but you can say, well, those are not as accurate because they're renovated or, you know, whatever the distinguishing features are. And you can focus just on a handful of sales that are, you know, arguing for a lower value. Uniformity is more of a fairness argument. And that's where if your home is being valued at higher than other similar homes, then it's not fair. You're paying taxes, you're paying higher taxes on basically a similar home than other people in your area. So this is where you're going to be looking at what the tax assessor says those houses are worth and comparing them to yours to try and figure out if there's any similar homes that you can point to argue for a lower value. And with this, now you're looking at the 2020 assessment values. So it's going to be the fair market values for this year from the notices of assessment that just went out. So sales, it's last year. Assessment uniformity is going to be for this year. So that gets a little confusing sometimes. To find the appeal form, you can actually go online and you can either appeal online or you can just get the form. So you want to go to appeals. This is again the fultonassessor.org website. Go to appeals, go to online filing, scroll down, and you'll see in online services. That link will take you to the online process. It does require a login. It is not necessarily the same login as what you may have recently set up for your notices. It's a different company that runs these, and they were going to try and find a way to bridge those, I think, but I'm not sure that that's happened. So it may require a separate login from what you already had. Now, if you've appealed in the past, then you may already have this login and you'd be able to log in right in and appeal. If you'd rather have the paper form, you scroll down a little bit farther and under manual filing, there's going to be the current appeal of assessment form in a PDF link. So you just click the link and it'll pull up a PDF that you can print out and do. And it's going to look like this. You're Carrie. Okay. So the appeal form is going to have basic information that you need to fill in. So like the property owner's name, your contact information. You want to put the parcel ID number that Carrie pointed out on the notice of assessment. You also want to be sure to check certain things. So you want to check that this is a real property appeal. It's real estate, so it's real property that you're filing the appeal for. You want to be sure to indicate what the ground for appeal is. Is it value? Is it uniformity? Is it exemption denied? Is it all three? Is it two of them? You know, whatever it is you're going to be basing your argument on, you want to be sure to check that. If you fail to check one of these, you can't come back later and add it. So again, you know, once the deadline passes, this is your appeal. So if you don't check the exemption denied and it turns out you need to appeal that, you can't come back and appeal that. That's going to be something you're going to have to fight the following year. The same with value or uniformity. So if there's any doubt, go ahead and check it. You can withdraw the appeal, but you want to. There's some strategy to whether you want to include value and uniformity depending on what arguments you have available. You also want to check the Board of Equalization. Now, so the choices are Board of Equalization, arbitration, or hearing officer. Hearing officer is basically going to be for non-homestead real property. So it's like commercial properties, investment properties, things like that, with a higher value. Arbitration is going to be sort of similar to the Board of Equalization, except that it's one person trying to reach an agreement between the two parties. But it's going to cost you a filing fee. So you'll have to pay for the arbitration. With Board of Equalization, you don't have to pay for that. So that's, we've had some good success with the Board of Equalization, so that's where I would do it. Both the Board of Equalization and arbitration can be appealed to Superior Court. So the end result could be the same. You want to check the billing preference, and you have a choice of doing it at 85% or 100%. And what that means is that when your tax bill comes out, if you click the 100%, it's going to come out at the higher value. So you'll go ahead and pay the property taxes based on the higher value, even if you're challenging that value. If you check the 85%, or if you don't check anything, it's going to assume that you want the 85%. And that's going to do the tax bill at either 85% of the new value or last year's value. So either way, you're going to be paying less than what would be required if you were doing it at the 100%. I find the 85% is good in part because hopefully you'll win and not have to pay a whole lot more. And also it allows you time to save that money to be able to ultimately afford to pay that final bill once it comes out. Because what will happen is after the appeal is done, once there's a final decision on your value, they'll issue a new bill. And if there's money owed, then you're going to need to pay it within 30 days of that final bill. Or if you're owed money back, then they're going to refund the money, hopefully within 30 days, but it depends. The other thing that you're going to need to think about is the owner's opinion of value. So this is where you have to say, if you're going to challenge value or uniformity, you need to say what the value should be. If you're not sure, you can put last year's value, you can kind of guess at it, you can put a low value. I would lowball it, whatever you end up doing, but you don't have to have absolute certainty if this is what the value should be. This is going to be your first bite at the apple, basically. You're not really going to be locked into a value until you're in front of the Board of Equalization, if you get that far. And so that's really when you're going to have to be able to prove that your value is better than the tax assessor's value. So put something down, but if you can get a ballpark of what it should be, that's great. So you have decisions to make. You need to decide what grounds for appeal, what the value should be. Ideally, the best practice is to have everything ready and include it when you file that first appeal. That's the best practice. You want to be sure to have done the research, look for what the value should be asserting a value that you can support, provide a list of the comparables, photographs, appraisals, any other evidence that you have, include it all in there and submit it. You may not have all of that. You may not have any of that. You want to at least get the appeal in. The minimum to submit your appeal is going to be that basis of claim. You can check whatever grounds you're appealing on. You want to be sure to put the proposed valuation for the property. Select that you want to go to the Board of Equalization hearing and select 85%. So those are going to be the key things. You can just submit the form with nothing else as long as you have that information in there. And again, the key to this is the deadline. You only have 45 days from when that came out. So it came out on June 19th. Whether you received it or not, that's going to be the starting point. 45 days from that, August 3rd, that's going to be the deadline. After, August 4th, it's too late. But if you can get the evidence and, supporting arguments and all that stuff before the deadline, great. But if not, really, you kind of have until this last point. You have until the Board of Equalization to develop the evidence that you need and be able to make an articulate explanation of why you think that value is better than what the tax assessor is saying. So, if you can't get the evidence done now, that's okay. Just be sure you get it done before the Board of Equalization hearing.
Stacy, we had just a very brief question. Is there any need to fill out the owner's opinion of value if you were only appealing because of your exemption?
No, I don't think it hurts to put one in there, but no, that really is just for the value and the uniformity appeals.
Okay, great. All right, so moving on to gathering evidence, what websites to use. Okay, so we're just going to briefly talk about how to gather evidence, and then we're going to talk about the type of evidence that you'll want depending on your argument and how to get that specific type of evidence. So the two websites that we tend to rely upon a lot in Fulton County for these cases are these two websites. So that first one, IAS Public Access, you can just also get to through that same fultonassessor.org. website and you can just click search my property, you're then in. So you already saw that when we talked about looking up your own property. That's that website. Another website is an older one. It's just been around a bit longer. And it has a lot of the similar functionalities. It just sometimes depends on preference. Some searches are easier on one or harder on the, like you will have to figure that out for yourself and what works well for how you're searching for properties. The second one is QPublic. If you just Google QPublic Fulton County, you'll find it. And both of these are totally free websites. You do not need accounts to log into either one of them. You just can access them. Okay, so like we discussed before, the first step that you're going to want to do is start off with your own home. You need to see what information they have about your home, whether that is accurate, and what arguments regarding your home you're going to start with. Okay, so you just click that property search link right there from Fulton Assessor, then you're in that AI or IAS search engine. And so look at all these ways you can search. You can search a bunch of different ways for the information that you need. So if you know that your name is on the record for this property, sometimes the easiest way is just to search the owner. But you might say, well, I've got the parcel ID right here. I know it'll pull it right up. So you can do the parcel ID. There's an address search. The advanced search is really useful for when you start gathering evidence. And we'll talk about that more a little bit later when we're talking about what types of arguments you're making. But Stacy and I have had fun with that advanced search since they started this website. You can pull some really good information and it can really cull down the amount of information that you're looking at. Because when you think of how many people own property in Fulton County and how many property, like parcels of property there are, it's a lot. And then moving on, you can see like some other searches, but you don't really need to do that right now. And there's also a map search. And we're going to talk more about doing the searches. This is an overview of what you're going to use for the searches. So this is what QPublic looks like. So it looks a little bit different. One thing that I do like about the QPublic website is that when you start searching by owner name, by location address, it will automatically pop up with suggestions. So that way, if you are on McNabb Street, like I mentioned before, and there's suddenly a space in that, you can figure it out really quickly. And so those are the two big ones. And then let's go to the next slide. Right. So this is just reviewing the property information. We're back at the fultonassessor.org/the IAS website. So the first question is it accurate? Is the information they have accurate? So we've got both screens up on right now. The one behind it is the IAS, and then the one closer to us is QPublic, as you can see, as noted. And so you can find the same information on both largely. It's just the way it looks. One thing I like about QPublic and the way the QPublic page looks is that everything is on one page. So you can just, we'll see, but you can just scroll down and see everything on one page. On the IAS website, the Fulton Assessor website, you just click around. You see on that left-hand side, there's all those things you can click on, residential, permits, values, all of that stuff. So it's all there. Okay, moving on. So again, we've got QPublic. These are both QPublic. And so this shows you how, like I said, it's on one page, so it's a little bit easier to read if you're just trying to glance through a bunch of things.
Yeah, you scroll down and look at all the information that's here.
Yeah, so that's what that is. The right is just scroll down further from the left and zoomed in a little bit. So the thing that you are looking at, right? So yeah, we've got all these circles coming up for some of the most important things. So starting at the left, we see again, parcel number, location address, property class, which not gonna be super important right now, neighborhood number. So we see the neighborhood number again. This should be the same neighborhood number that you see on your assessment notice. The same address, the same parcel number, all of that. You see some other things, zoning and tax districts. You see acres, And you also see some summaries of homestead exemptions. Again, the easiest way to figure out if you're getting the right ones is to call the office. But you can also look on here and see what they list and see if you can figure out the numbers. So it has the acreage too. You want to pay attention to that, because if you know that you have fewer acres than they're saying you do, that could be a reason to lower the property value.
Also,
okay.
We tend to talk in square footage rather than in acreage. So because, you know, in town properties tend to be kind of smaller. You can get the actual square footage from the IAS public access, or you can do the math. I would have to look up what an acre is in square feet, but that's one way to sort of do those together.
Okay. And then, so when we're looking, I'm going to move to the right because that's just a zoomed in part of the bottom of the left part. Okay. So you see just that general report. It's all in one place. You can see everything. You see how many stories it is, what the exterior wall is made of, the style of the house, the year it was built. All of that is pretty useful information, because when you start comparing your property to other properties, if you're comparing it to a property that's way, way newer, and the newer property is worth more than your property, well, that makes sense. It's a newer property. You also see the residential square footage that's there. And that is what we're basing a lot of this off of. We'll talk about that a bit more when we dig into evidence in a little bit, but we're really looking at that residential square footage to show the difference between properties, because then you can compare properties easier. And then we've also got finished basement square feet, how many baths and half baths there are, how many bedrooms there are, all of that stuff. And you can look through there and see if any of it is incorrect, because it might be. Every now and then there maybe was an addition, and then, or there was a deck and then it fell over and it's been demolished and now there's not a deck, but they still claim you have a deck, things like that. Okay, and then we see on the right side, that circle to the farthest right, heating system, whether there's central AC, fixtures, that sort of thing. And then also, these are important, you see grade factor, it says C+. And then below that, there's a cost and design factor. And then below that, there's CDU, average. So what does that mean? So grade factor is basically when they built the house, how good were the materials? Right, Stacy? Yeah. It's how good were the materials when they built the house. So that's usually not something that you're going to be able to argue against.
Well, I have seen it occasionally. It has to do with the style of the house and the materials used and that sort of thing. So occasionally there is an argument to be made there, particularly if you look at some of the houses around you and they're showing Ds when yours is a C, then you can say, well, wait, that mine should be a D, or, you can adjust it some, but it's a lot harder argument for kind of the non-appraiser public.
Right. So that usually is just a good thing to look at when you're comparing properties. I mean, if one property is an A+ and one's an A, that's not a huge difference. But if you are comparing a property that was built with like C+ materials to a property that was built with A materials, that might show more of a difference. I would expect the A material property to be worth more if it's still in good condition. That's what the CDU is. So CDU can be very useful, and that's something you definitely need to pay attention to when you're looking for evidence, because what that is what the condition of your property during the year we're looking at. So what is your property like now? And so this one says average. A lot of people's properties are average, but what makes a property average or not? A lot of the arguments we use to argue against what the condition of the property are really just like basic, does this make sense to me arguments. So if my house has major roof damage, I'm not going to say that's average, because hopefully most people's houses don't have major roof damage. And if they still have my house as being average, I'm going to tell them that they need to lower it to maybe fair, which is right below average. And if they lower it, then their computer will spit out a different value for my home then. because they won't just be looking at other average houses in my neighborhood to determine that value. They'll be looking at other fair houses in my neighborhood. So these are all things that you can use, and you can pile these arguments on top of each other. You can use a bunch of different arguments. Oftentimes we'll talk about like a condition of a property and how maybe that property should be lowered from good to average or average to fair. And then we'll also talk about some of these other arguments. Okay, and then we can also see all the sales that have happened. So when you're looking up other sales of a property, you can see those on this page. And then valuation. So valuation is that third part down there with the mouse is, and it shows the year. So in this case, this is an older example, and it's a circling.
Sorry, that was an old screenshot that I had. Sorry.
Yeah, it's circling the year 2018, which is fine. What you'll be looking at is the year 2020. And it should match what your assessment says, what your property assessment paper says. What's great is that it divides the value up. So the assessed value, or actually the total value, which is at 100% value, for that one is 548.7. And then you see the 40% assessed value is below there at 219. What we usually are gonna focus on is the total value, because that has more meaning to me. Like, I feel like I have some sense of what a $500,000 house is like. I don't have some sense of what 40% of a 500, that number makes more sense to me because it's talking about the value that it would sell for, or the value that is the actual value of the home. So that's usually the value I'm looking at. What's useful is they divide it up. They divide it up by land value and building value. So when you're looking at another property and that's like on your street, let's say you look at another property on your street and they got assessed, and their land value, they've got the same amount, about the same amount of land as you, but for some reason their land value is way less. That's a question you can ask. That's a comparison you can draw. And so all of that information can be useful. Now, when it comes down to some of it, like, does it matter if the exterior wall is frame or the exterior wall is brick? I mean, you can make some minor arguments towards those. Those aren't going to be your strongest arguments. You can always loop those in. And when you're looking for houses that are similar and you see those minor differences, like I said, they're more minor differences. So that doesn't spoil your argument. You don't just have to dump that house. You can still look at it. Okay, let's move on to what it looks like on the IAS website.
We have a couple of questions if we want to just answer this quickly.
Okay.
One of them is, are you supposed to limit your comps to your zip code or neighborhood code? And what's the limit they prefer for those comps?
We're going to talk about that when we get into the evidence part.
Perfect. And then I think I know the answer to this, but it says, does a room have to have a closet to be considered a bedroom? I think the answer is yes for that.
Stacey, do you know exactly how they define bedroom for the tax records?
I think that's correct. I think they're going off the real, the real estate market idea of it. So I think that's correct. I'm not 100% sure though. We can circle back on that. I just know that
from your HGTV, so I don't know. My assessment there is right. And then lastly, is there a name reference for neighborhood numbers?
Yeah. So
I will say on the neighborhood number, it does not necessarily coincide to what you think your neighborhood is. Mm-hmm. The other thing to keep in mind is that it's a 4 or 5 digit number. And so the 5-digit ones are usually kind of carved out of the original 4-digit numbers. So you want to keep an eye, especially if you're searching for a 4-digit number, sometimes it'll pull up the 5-digit as well. You want to kind of keep an eye out on that.
And so sometimes when you're looking at a neighborhood, for instance, I'm actually in DeKalb County, but they divide the neighborhoods similarly. My neighborhood is like 2 streets. It is not big. And there are parts of what I would consider anecdotally my neighborhood that are not in my numerical neighborhood. So there's really not a good way to like provide a phrase for any of these neighborhoods. Some of them are very small, and then some neighborhood numbers are really much larger. And my understanding is that they divide it up based on what they consider to be similar within that geographic area. And so if they see that there's a neighborhood, or like there are just a bunch of very large houses that really aren't similar to a couple streets away where there are smaller houses, you'll generally see those be due to 2 different neighborhood codes. Not always, but that's one of the things that we see. Okay, so this is the full, if you go to the fultonassessor.org website and you click through, you find a property, this is how you pull it up. And this is if you suggest that if you click residential on the side, you see again a lot of that similar information. So that Stacy is showing us if you click residential and also if you click values. And so it's showing the same information that you'd be able to see on QPublic. You just click around in little different spots. And then we can also see at the bottom of that some additions, which I think is useful. You can, and I don't think, I'm just going to mention this really fast. On the right side of the screen, when you pull up your property on fultonassessor.org, there's a little thing and you can select property card. And if you select property card, it's like their technical analysis of your property, and it's just showing like how many floors you have and like more details about any additions or square footage and stuff like that. So if you suspect that there's really something's not making sense and you think they have the wrong information, I'd take a look at the property card first and see if there's something that really looks off to you there. Okay, if we've got one more question, if square footage on file is lower than what the property appraiser came back with, would this be good information to use in an appeal? So I'm not 100% sure what that means. So the appraiser, if you're talking about I'm going to assume that you're talking about like the tax appraiser person who just has created the value of their home, that will match whatever the tax office has. Now, if there's another appraiser who came out and said your square footage was different and it's significantly different in that it's smaller square footage, I would raise that. What about you?
That actually segues nicely into the next piece where we're going to talk about gathering that information and how to then start looking at making it into an argument. And so the first one is the value-based appeal piece of it, where, you know, what information does the assessor have and is it correct? So you've gone through and you've looked at all the stuff that they have about your home, and you want to think about, you know, are there any of these things that would make the value higher than what I think it should be that are incorrect? So the square footage, if the tax office has the square footage off by more than 300 square feet, that is grounds for appealing the value. That would make a difference in the actual value. Now, keep in mind, they're doing the square footage from the outside, not from the inside, so that makes a little bit of a difference. And I guess that's probably why they have the 300 square foot sort of wiggle room. But if, you know, if they're off by more than 300 or about 300 square feet or more, then, you know, raise that. Don't raise it if they have it as lower than what you think it should be. You don't have to alert them where they have things wrong. And you want to think about if they have things wrong, you don't want them coming into your house if you're doing a condition argument and they need to come in and see the condition. They'll also find the extra bathroom. So you want to keep those in mind. But you want to think through, you know, in the information that they have, are there things that they can't see, like the condition of your home, the quality of the construction, you know, is there an accessory building that they have listed that's been torn down? Do they show you a central heat and air and you don't have central heat? You know, these are all things that will factor into it. Also, the number of bedrooms and bathrooms. If any of those things are wrong, think about doing a value appeal based on that they had incorrect information. Then you also want to take that information that you've just gathered and compare it to other homes. So again, you're trying to look at similar homes. So you're going to be wanting to look at ones that are, you know, built in a similar time frame. With the year built, they also may have an effective year built or a rehab, or, you know, they may have another date. That means that it was renovated at some point pretty significantly. And so that later date is sort of more in line with the age of the house. So you can say, you know, listen, this 1929 house that was built at the same time as mine also has an effective date of 1978. That's really a 1978 house, not like mine, and it shouldn't be considered. So you can make some arguments based on that. But you want to gather the basic information about your house so that then when you start looking at the houses that were sold in 2019, you'd be able to pick out the ones that are more similar to your home. You want to try and be as similar as possible. But again, use the dollars per square foot calculation to compare the properties to make it a little bit easier to compare apples to apples. Again, this is just for homes that were sold in 2019. Carrie, do you want to do this?
Yes, sorry, I was on mute. One thing that I also, someone asked a question, I think it is a good note, that when you're considering similarities and differences between your home and other people's homes, both in terms of a value-based appeal and what I'm going to talk about, which is uniformity-based, it is useful to think about all the different ways. So we talked about square footage and issues that they might have on the record, but when you're comparing your home or your property to another property, what makes them similar or different? So someone asked, what if your property has like an easement or nearby power lines? That does often lower the value of a property. And so if I can find other properties that have that similar issue and I can compare my property to those properties and they're somewhat similar to mine, that might support a further argument. Though we have also just said, look, this property has a hole in the roof. This property is on a dirt road. This property doesn't have the view that another property has. And we've used those to argue that the value should be lower. So you really can think creatively and broadly about really when Stacy's talking about value, what would you want to think about when you buy a house? Would that lower the value of the house, in your opinion, if you were buying it? Probably some of those things would. And so you can think kind of like a buyer when you're considering these arguments.
Hey, Carrie, what about appealing based on public street conditions? Like if you're on a single lane road, like only one car can come.
So I wouldn't use that, and Stacy, please chime in. I wouldn't use that as like a sole reason to appeal, but I think that's a good supporting reason. If they're comparing, if you talk to the appraiser, and we'll talk about that in the future, but if you talk to the appraiser and all of the other homes they're comparing your home to are not on like a busy single lane street and they're all on these bigger streets or in a quiet neighborhood, that is a difference that I would raise.
Yes, it tends to be more persuasive.
Oh. Okay, it seems like Stacy froze.
If you can find homes on your street or right. Okay, are we back?
Yes. So you said it would be more persuasive if you could find homes on your street to make an argument that the value should be lower based on those. Right.
But if you can't, you go with what you can find and make the argument.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on to uniformity-based appeal, and Stacy and I are going to be trading these off to try to reduce confusion between these two types of appeals. And so uniformity-based appeal is that fairness that Stacy talked about. And we are only basically looking at the 2020 value according to the tax assessor's office. So what other houses on your street have been appraised as, or other houses in your neighborhood or other houses in your area have been appraised as by the tax assessor's office. That's what we're looking at. And so what you're doing is comparing your 2020 value with other similar properties. And you can use a bunch of different things to do that. You can use the map function on the assessor's website or on QPublic. There's a map function. So if you're really wanting to know what other houses in your immediate vicinity have been appraised for and how similar they are to yours, you can use those map functions. That can
We're going to get into that with screenshots in a minute.
Great. Yeah, that can be a really convenient way to do that. You can use the advanced search on the assessor's website. Like I said, that's one of my favorite things to do. You can narrow it by number of bedrooms. You can narrow it by square footage. And I just put like from 600 to 1600 square feet if my house has 1,000 square feet. I try to keep it somewhat large in order to do that. And when you're thinking about other conditions, you're also looking at the similar age of the home, the construction materials, the condition of the home. And what we like to use is a dollars per square foot calculation to compare properties. And the reason that's useful in comparing properties is if, let's say that my house, right, these are my houses. My house looks exactly like the house next door to me. They are super easy to compare. They've got the same square footage, really easy to compare. The thing is that most of us don't live in an area where every home looks like ours. There I am with my home again, my little red home. How do I compare my little red home to this big white house? And the way that we do it is consider the price per square footage. And how do you do that? It's actually really easy. It takes a little bit of math. Excel can do it for you. You can do it by calculator. It's not super hard. You just take the value of the property. So for uniformity, for that uniformity argument, that fairness argument, you're looking at the 2020 tax assessor's appraised value of the property, and you divide it by the square foot. And we're talking about the internal square footage. And you find that on the tax records. So they provide all that information for you. So you can take that and divide it. And once you do that, you can actually compare how expensive each square foot is in each house. And that's the argument that we use. That's what a lot of the appraisers look at when they're comparing properties. They are looking at that same thing. So if you walk into your hearing with those things already prepared, it makes it much easier to present your argument and to also potentially work out something with the appraiser who's been assigned to your case. And when we're talking about value-based appeals and using price per square foot, it applies there too. We're looking at what your house value is for 2020 versus what other houses sold for in 2019. And again, you just use that same price per square foot argument.
Yeah, so you just divide the sale price by the square footage to get the price per square foot for sales.
I think Carrie, this question, if there's a basis on uniformity, if a neighbor had taxes freezed for 3 years. So no.
Yeah. The problem is that when it's been frozen for 3 years, which you get if you follow through with an appeal or reach an agreement and they agree to do that. If it's been frozen for 3 years, the thing is that the value that it will reflect is a value from a year or two ago, which is just not going to be a good argument. And a lot of other appraisers, if you present that as an argument, either at the appeal or just to the appraiser, will just throw it out.
We'll touch on that again later. So now the next question is, where do you find this information? So again, when we're doing value search, we're looking at sales from the prior year. So the easiest, you can go to either QPublic or IAS Public Access, and they both have special searches that you can use to gather the sales information. This is one where QPublic tends to be a lot easier simply because they have a button. You just hit the button and boom, it has the sales. You do want to narrow the sales to just be January 1st, 2019 to December 31st, 2019, and then hit the button, and it's going to come up with a list of properties in your neighborhood code that sold in 2019. There's also at the top of QPublic, there's a sales search tab up there, and it allows you to do some other criteria to limit the search. And this is good if it's coming back with way too many sales in your neighborhood. This is a way to try and limit that. It's going to come up with a list of properties that sold, and it's going to give you just some basic information. You can use this screen if you're comfortable with this screen. You can just use this screen. You can sort it by, or reorganize it by the various columns, or you can click on the parcel ID number here and look up the actual information on that property. I like to go to Excel because, as Carrie mentioned, when we're doing a price per square foot, Excel will do that calculation for me. I just put the formula in and let it calculate it, and then I only have to look at the ones that have a price per square foot that are in the range that I want to argue. And so to do that, again, on QPublic, it's very easy. You click on where it says Excel and download, and boom, you can get an Excel spreadsheet and you can work with it. It all depends on what you're comfortable with. This, working with it online is also pretty simple and just a matter of holding a calculator to do the price per square foot. As Carrie mentioned, the advanced search can be wonderful. It can give you just so much information. The downside is that it can be really persnickety. You may have a hard time getting it narrowed down enough to be able to make it workable. but it's a good place to start, at least trying it. To do the search for value, you want to, again, focus on just the 2019 sales. So you're going to try and you're going to click on criteria and choose what criteria you want to search by. So you want to do it by neighborhood code, and when you click on that, it'll come up with a box. You put the neighborhood code into that box and you click add. Then you go back to criteria and you choose sales date. It'll come up with a range, box for ranges. And so you want to do the range again from January 1st, 2019 to December 31st, 2019, and try and search by that, see if it comes up with a small enough number that it'll do the whole search. If not, then you might want to add in some of the other criteria to try and limit it and do a little bit more similar to your property. One thing I often do is I'll put in a sales price range that, starting like at 10,000 or something like that. So you don't need all the sales that were for zero. That's clearly not going to be a qualified sale. That's a transfer for nominal value. So, sort of get rid of all of those that you're not going to use anyways, and then put a high range, something above, what you're looking for. That's one way to limit it. You can also put in the price, the square footage, and do kind of a range that encompasses your square footage. So, some that are lower, some that are higher. Those things will help you limit the sale at all, or the list that you come up with. But it'll also give you the option, if you use show in results, then those things will show up in your in the list that it generates. So again, if you're going to use just the list that's on the computer, this is handy to be able to see, do the math to figure out what the price per square foot is just by dividing these. And again, you can click on the parcel number to go and see the information about these properties, to see, what kind of information they have about them, to see if they are somewhat similar. If you want to download it, it's a little trickier, but it's still doable. So you want to go to Selection Manager, do Select Page All, so that it selects all of the entries on all of the pages, and then do Attribute Export and Go. And then that should allow you to save it to your computer and open it in Excel or whatever program that you're using for this. And any sort of spreadsheet program would work. And then you can start looking in that and sort and do that. And then magic thing with the advanced search is that when you export it to Excel, it comes up with all of the information, or almost all the information that you want. It's going to show you the number of bedrooms, bathrooms, year built, all of that stuff, the stuff that you don't necessarily see on this screen. And so it can be just a wonderful thing and an easy way to really narrow down what you need to look at. So those are the big searches that you can do for the sales. Another way to look at sales, and it's sometimes more fun, is to use the map function. So on IIS Public Access, if you just go down the menu, there is a map. So if you're on your property and you click on map, it's going to just bring up a map with your property highlighted. And so, these are the houses that you're going to be looking at. You can actually use the layers, which, I'm old. I wasn't real clear that these little floating pieces of paper are the layers, and that using that, it allows you to tell what things you want to be highlighted on the map. Again, this is an old screenshot. But it now it would show yearly sales for 2019 as well. And so you want to click on unclick these others and click that. And then you want to click on the little eye so that you can still click around, and it'll bring up a map that has those other year sales highlighted. And then you can just click on those, just, randomly click on them, see what information they have. It'll have a little basic information about your property, about the properties you're clicking on. It'll give the neighborhood code, so you can confirm that the neighbors near you are still in the same neighborhood code that you're looking for. It also has a tab where you can look at the sales information, and that'll tell you, the amount of the sale, who the grantor grantees are, whether it's qualified or not. So you can look at some basic information. If you want to see more about those properties, you can click on the parcel ID number and be taken to the information about that property. You can also do a map search on View Public. The map button is a little bit smaller, so 2 circles. So you click on that. Again, it's going to come up with the property, with your property highlighted. With it, it's a little bit easier because the layers are more obvious. It's just there on the left-hand side. You click what things you wanted to show, and then you can have it show the yearly sales. You can then click around to the different properties to see, what properties sold, what they sold for. It gives a little bit of basic information down here. If you want to see more, then you go over to report on the right-hand side, and that'll pull up the page about that property. And so you can start comparing and looking for anything that that had a sale that would be a good argument for your property. One word of warning. I've mentioned that they'll say whether it's qualified or not. Qualified sales are arm's length transactions between a knowledgeable buyer and a knowledgeable seller. These are supposed to be, it's a fair market value. They're supposed to be looking for what on the fair market would this house sell for. And so it makes sense that they're going to knock out sales where it's between related parties or for a nominal value, like 0. Those just aren't qualified sales. Those are going to tend to be, from a mother to a father, or, a mother to a son. They tend to be like kind of familial relationships, or sometimes related corporations. But there are a lot of properties that are sold and marked unqualified that I think should still, they still fit into this definition of what a qualified sale is. So if you can't make an argument based on qualified sales, take a look at some of those unqualified ones. What we find is that, especially in cases where there was a house that was flipped, they'll say, well, the initial sale to this investor is not a qualified sale because then they sold it for more later. Well, in a lot of our cases, my clients were in homes that they would not be selling, at the later value because they need the renovation that happened between those two. So they, the investor bought low because he needed to invest money into it to be able to sell it. And that's the way our clients were. And so we've been able to make the argument that, well, this earlier sale really is a qualified sale, and it's far more comparable to my client's sale than what was later sold after it had been renovated or, sometimes torn down and rebuilt. So, you can make arguments, but you need to be sure. First, look to see if they're qualified sales, if at all possible, use those. If not, then you want to look at what the reason given for the property not being a qualified sale, and also what the names of the grantor grantee are. If it looks like they're related, then they probably are. You can actually, if there are corporations, and there's no telling if they're related, you can go to the Secretary of State's website and look up those corporations and see if there's any indication that they're in any way related. Often they're not. So, it's a good way to sort of make the argument, without great support. Otherwise, if you're not able to find the qualified sales, it is a way to frame an argument that can still, make the case for why you should have a lower value. Okay.
Okay, so uniformity research. So remember, we're back at the fairness thing again, and it's not about sales, it's about what the tax office values a property at. And so you're looking for appraised values for the current year for 2020 to justify a lower value for your home. So it's kind of like hunting for Easter eggs. Stacy and I kind of enjoy the research part of this, but we're also nerds. So I don't know whether you'll enjoy it, but it's a little bit you're just really looking for things that look kind of like your house, that you can relate to your house, or things that look very different from your house. So what you need to do to find the data, Stacy already went over some of these things, but the maps on QPublic and IAS Public Access can be really great to gather data. You can start in your immediate vicinity, and when you click on it, it tells you what the current assessment is on some of them. I think even, so this is the assessor's website. Stacey, do you remember, does it tell you the assessment amount on it? I know that the QPublic does. It says,
Yeah.
like on the QPublic one, okay. Thanks, Lynn. Lynn says it does.
I think you just have to scroll down right here.
Okay, perfect. I thought so. So you can just click around. So the way I do it is if I know that there is like a really tiny house on my block, I'm not going to look at that house. But if I know there's a house that like kind of looks from the outside like it's similar to mine in age, and I click on that and for some reason their value is lower, I'm going to open that and see more information I could find. If once I click through, it says that that house is literally uninhabitable because it's like missing a full wall, that's not going to be a good comparison for my house. So you have to pay attention to those things once you get past this initial hurdle. But it's really, those maps can be really useful. You can also just use, if we move on to the next one, the advanced search that we already talked about. And I like to use this advanced search when it works for me and I can like download the data. And Stacy mentioned this, but you can narrow the criteria. Oftentimes what I'll do is narrow by appraised value, and it should pull up the 2020 appraised value. So I'll narrow it by appraised value. I might, let's say they appraised my house at $100,000. I might start off kind of a big wide range. Like maybe I'll do like 50 to 150 or 200 or whatever, and then narrow it if it comes up with a lot of data to where it's closer to what I think that my value should be and what my value currently is. And then, so I'll usually narrow by appraised value, by neighborhood code. We already talked about that. Then you got to look out. Stacy mentioned this before. Sometimes the neighborhood code set has 5 letters. And when you look it up on this, it'll give you some that are just 5 numbers, and it'll give you something that's just the 4 numbers. And while occasionally we'll use those, normally we're looking for something that's the exact same number as our neighborhood code, because that's just the best comparison. And then I'll narrow by square feet. That's usually, I'll start with those 3. And then if it's a lot, you can narrow by any of the other stuff. Stacy mentioned by year built. There have been times when I'm like looking for, I'm like one of the newer houses on the block. And so I'm going to have to compare this house built in 96 to a house built in 1950. Not an ideal comparison, but sometimes you've got to use not ideal comparisons in order to make your point, and that's okay. Okay, so let's go to the next one. So uniformity pitfalls. So we already talked a little bit about this. So you guys are ahead of the game. You really have to look at whether the value is frozen due to a 2018 and 2019 appeal. I cannot tell you how disappointing it is when you find something and you're like, what? It's a 3-bedroom house exactly like my house, and it's valued for like $100,000 less than mine. That sounds great. And then you look in and you see that it's frozen. So Lynn, the way that you can tell, someone asked this question, the way that you can tell that it's frozen is if you recall one of the previous slides where it shows you when you're looking at all the information like bedrooms for a property and like condition for a property and how much square foot the property has. When you scroll down further, you can see what it's been valued at in the past. And if last year's value is the exact same as this year's value, chances are it's frozen. And sometimes you can see when it was frozen.
You can confirm that by looking at appeal history.
That's true.
The appeal history will actually show whether it was appealed in the past, and that'll, if it was appealed in the last 2 years and the value's the same, you can assume that it's frozen.
And the appeal records you can see most easily on the assessor's website, that IAS one, as opposed to QPublic. And it's one of those like side things that you can just select, and you can select appeals history, and it does make it easier to see that. Okay, and then consider if there are houses that are more similar to yours that might be better. Sometimes the hard thing is that when do you decide as the end of your like research? And depending on how big your neighborhood is, sometimes you just end up in this research loop where you're just looking for more and more properties. So you have to stop when you have to stop. But sometimes it really is useful to keep going for a little bit more and just see if there's another really good property. And there have been times when I've gone to an appraiser and really hung my hat on 2 or 3 really great properties. Oftentimes what we'll aim at is doing like 5 or 6 good comparison properties for value and 5 or 6 good comparison properties for uniformity if we're arguing for both of those. I usually aim for about 4 to 6. If you go more than that, it gets really overwhelming. And if you go less than that, it really looks like you've been cherry picking. So that's what we usually try to do. I already mentioned this, avoid uninhabitable houses if your home is livable. Someone asked, what happens if there are no comparable homes in your area? So usually you'll be able to find some. Sometimes you start looking and all those homes are valued at more than yours. And the thing is that the property values have just skyrocketed in your neighborhood. And sometimes you don't have a great argument. You can still proceed forward with an appeal, even if your only argument is like, well, my roof is old and these other people have newer roofs. Even if it's not like the best argument in the world, you can still proceed forward with the appeal and see if you can work something out. And we'll talk about the appeal process, and then and also the frees you get through that appeal process. Sometimes we also, if I'm the only old house remaining in a neighborhood and every other house is new, sometimes I'll use those as comparable houses and say, this house is the same value as you said my house is, but that house is way newer, or that house has had renovations. You can get kind of in the weeds with it and use those as comparisons. You can also sometimes go slightly outside your neighborhood code, especially if there's a good reason to. You do have to be prepared to kind of have a discussion with the appraiser about that, because they're not going to want to look at things outside the neighborhood code, because the neighborhood code is one of those things they really rely on when they're comparing homes. But like, if you're on the side of the street that is one neighborhood code and literally across the street is a different neighborhood code, I'd still consider those properties. And I would still potentially use those as comparable properties. But if you're looking around, now remember, we're talking about two big reasons for appeal. So it might be that you don't have great properties for the current value, for the value or the uniformity argument. Maybe everyone's properties have just suddenly skyrocketed and the tax office is saying that everyone's property is worth a lot. You can still look at sales. You can still look at those value arguments, and you might find more in the sales records. But again, if your neighborhood just happens to be a really tiny neighborhood and you need to look outside of it, that's okay. Just be kind of prepared for that argument. Okay, and then we wanted to mention additional appeal evidence. Some of you have already mentioned this already, but recent appraisals are great. Now, depending on your reason for appeal, the appraisals can be more or less useful. So let's say you appealed just on value. So what you're looking at is what other properties would have sold for in 2019. So if you have an appraisal from late 2018 or throughout 2019, that's going to be great evidence. Even a 2020 appraisal is pretty good evidence. You got an appraisal from 2016, not useful, not going to be super useful. I mean, if it shows that there's like some really serious problem, like termite damage, and you're just using it to back up that, sure. But recent appraisals are going to be great. If you can afford to get an appraisal, I would first kind of look at whether, like, I would look around, do my own little research, see if there looks like there might be an argument. And then if you can afford the appraisal and you can do it and you think it's going to be supportive, recent appraisals are really great evidence. And a lot of times if you show that to the tax appraiser, then they will usually agree to something. You won't even need to go to the hearing. Okay, so we are going to send out the PowerPoint. 2019 refinance appraisal would also be great. Yeah, all the different forms of appraisals, photographs. We have clients bring photographs of what's going on with their homes, and repair estimates. Sometimes we'll even look up estimates for repairs based on what like a company might say. Or if you looked into repairing something, a company sent you a proposal and you didn't take them up on it. Those things are all evidence.
If you're making an argument based on the condition of your home, having a photograph or a repair estimate is really a great thing to prove to them that really this is something that affects the value.
And just so you know, this recording will continue to be available on Facebook at the Atlanta Beltline Facebook page. Okay, so moving on to deadlines, we already talked about this, 45 days, August 3rd, the deadline is printed on the notice, and it doesn't matter if you received it. So if you haven't received it, just look it up online and you can appeal based on that. You don't have to have the paper in hand. Oh, sorry, Stacy. You were gonna do these slides. I stepped on you.
That's okay. No, we're kind of running up on the end of our allotted time. So you can submit the appeal on, in person. Now that the offices are open, you can submit the appeal by taking it in or going in person and appealing. You can send it in by mail. I would recommend that you send it in a way that has, proof that you send it on time and that they received it. Because sometimes you put it in and if they don't receive it quickly or if they misplace it, then they'll assume that you didn't appeal within the time frame. So you want to be sure to have that proof. And then you can also appeal online. Online will automatically generate a confirmation that you appealed it. So it's a good way to do it. It also allows you to go in and check for the appeal to see what the status of it is later. But it requires a login. It requires somebody that's, is somewhat computer savvy to be able to do that. So those are the ways to submit the appeal. To submit it online, basically you just, again, go to appeals, go to online services. It's going to take you to a page where you can either register if you don't already have a login, or you can just log in if you already have one. I will say this is not necessarily the same login as when you, if you signed up for the recent thing for online notices, it may not be the same login. So you want to keep that in mind. Once you've logged in, it's going to take you to a screen that shows, you want to go to available filings and you want to choose real property appeal. Again, that's, this is your real estate that you're appealing. So it's real property appeal. And then from there, it'll ask for your property tax ID number. So again, you should have that from your notice of assessment and your research. You want to plug that in and then it'll search for your property. And once you have your property up, it's just going to go through and ask you the questions that we went through in the paper form. And then you submit it. After you submit the appeal, the next step again is the tax bills. Again, if you have filed an appeal, it is going to be a temporary tax bill. You still need to pay it. And that's going to probably come out before you get any sort of response from the county. You may get an initial thing when you appeal saying that they received your appeal. What you're looking for from the response from the county, though, is a decision by the Board of Assessors on what your appeal value was. And Carrie's going to go into that in a little more detail in a minute. You then have the right to appeal that decision to the Board of Equalization. Again, the advantage of doing that is that you get a 3-year freeze if you just show up. So, even if you're not able to convince them to lower it, you still get something out of it. And we've had some pretty good success for getting them to at least lower it a little bit. A lot of times they'll take pity on the homeowners coming in. So you can, at least make some argument for why it should be lower, and hopefully you can get it down at least a little bit. Real quick, there's an 180-day rule, which is basically that they have to make a decision within 180 days. So if you file the appeal on July 1st, and you asserted a value of $58,000, they're supposed to make their decision by December 28th. That's 180 days from July 1st, not from August 3rd. It's from the day you actually submitted your appeal. And so once you submit your appeal, you may want to count it out just to see, what that 180 day is and mark it on your calendar, because they have to make that decision by the 180 days unless over 3% of the Tax Digest appealed, which has happened in the last couple of years. But it's not just that. They also have to notify you that they're going to take another 180 days, but they have to notify you of that more than 30 days before the end of the initial 130 days. And we found in the 180 days, we found in the past that they sometimes were not making this deadline. And if they don't make this deadline, it's kind of wonderful because you win. They have to accept your value if they don't make it within that 180-day rule. And so, it's worth keeping an eye out to see if that actually happens. If that happens, you may want to give us a call and we can talk through how you go about making sure that you get the credit for the value that you asserted, because they're not going to just automatically do it typically. Okay, so Carrie, you want to do?
Yes. Okay. So what happens next? So when you file your appeal, after that happens, the assessor will decide what they send you. So these are the different things they can send you. Most people get a no change letter, which is what we call it, which just says, hey, we looked at your appeal. We don't agree with you. We don't think we should lower the value. And then usually what they've done in the past for 2019, they just automatically certified them to the Board of Equalization, which is what we want to happen. And so hopefully that's what they will do this year too. I just see what the notice says and make sure that it says that it's certified to the Board of Equalization. And then they might offer to accept your value or offer some kind of compromise value. At that point, you'll want to consider, hey, is it worth like not following through with this and just accepting some of these lower values? If you do decide, yeah, that sounds good, we recommend that you do reach out to the appraiser and see if they will freeze that value for 3 years. Because one of the big pros to going to the hearing is that you do get that 3-year freeze. So if you can work it out ahead of time and still get that freeze, that is great. And then you don't have to worry about it for the next couple years even. If you disagree with the, if you disagree with the value or they won't agree to a 3-year freeze, then we recommend that you just request certification to the Board of Equalization to access that 3-year freeze. Okay, so this is what the no change letter looks like. Real simple. It comes from the Fulton County Board of Assessors. So just make sure that it says it's certified to the BOE. And then here is a notice of change. So I'm actually going to use this to also give you an example of someone asked, what do you do to reach out to the appraiser about the freeze? So on this form, you see appraisal staff contacts are these people. So I would just call the tax assessor's office and say, hey, who's working on my appeal? Who's working on my appraisal? And then they'll give you the staff contact. It may or may not be those people who were originally on the documents. And that's who you'll discuss negotiating with, who you'll discuss about the 3-year freeze. And then if they do agree to that 3-year freeze, just ask them to send it to you in writing. A lot of them will use email a lot. So they'll just might email you like, this is a confirmation. And that will be good. Okay, so one person asked, what happens if our appeal hearing from last year was canceled so it's still open? I would not appeal 2020 at this point, because if you consider, like if you follow the 2019 appeal through, then it should freeze it for 2019, 2020, and 2021. Stacy, do you have thoughts on that? I know
I agree with that. They have not resumed the hearings yet for the 2019 appeal, so they're still going to be coming up. And whatever the decision on that is going to be the ultimate decision in freezing for the next couple of years. So you don't need to appeal this. It doesn't hurt to appeal it if you really want to, just to preserve that, but you don't need to.
And there are sometimes when we had this happen last year, because there were a lot of people appealing last year as well, that that the bill will come due maybe before everything has been processed, and then I just see if they'll do it at a percentage. Hopefully you will have had your hearing for 2019, and that will be processed before the bill comes due. And if the bill comes out and it's wrong because they had not processed the freeze yet, I just give them a call and see what they tell you to do about that. Okay, so that's what this notice is. It's just the notice of change, but you'll see that appraisal staff on the initial notice as well, the assessment notice.
Also on this notice of change, just want to point out that it will also have the date that it was generated and the deadline for appealing to the Board of Equalization. So pay attention to that, because again, it's only going to be 30 days. You don't get the 45 days you did with the first one. And it's a little confusing because it looks exactly like the first one.
Okay, it looks like we're frozen again. Okay,
substantially like the first one.
Are you back, Stacy?
Yes, I don't know why.
We had one more question. I appealed last year and was denied. Where does that leave you? So if you appealed last year and you got to the hearing, you would have gotten the 3-year freeze, which means that your property value shouldn't change. And most of these property values are going up year to year, so it would still put you in a better position than your neighbors, most likely. If you did not follow through on appearing, so if you did not show up to the hearing, for instance, then it wouldn't be frozen, and I'd just file an appeal if you don't think the value is correct, and then follow through with the process. Okay, so here is the appeal hearing notice. So this is what they looked like last year. We assume it's probably going to look very similar this year, and it just shows you your hearing time and date. That's what it shows you. So we're still figuring out what it's going to exactly be like. The Board of Equalization hearing itself, like Stacy said, this is like 3 people, they're citizens of the county, and they have agreed to sit on this board. They have been, okay, someone confirmed that they're doing hearings via Zoom now. That's good. I'm glad that some hearings are moving forward.
Those may be the hearing officer ones. They may not be the Board of Equalization.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't heard that the Board of Equalization is doing those hearings. The issue might be that the people on the Board of Equalization might have, like, some of them have more access to like Zoom, for instance, than others. So we're a little bit going to have to see. So ordinarily when this hearing, that's good to know. Thanks for letting us know. So that might be how they do them in the future. That is good to know. So normally when these hearings come up, we try to reach out to the appraiser, and different appraisers are assigned different cases. Sometimes they're assigned the same neighborhood codes. I just call the office and ask who's on my case, and they will tell you the person. You can request their comps by emailing boa.openrecords@fultoncountyga.gov. And then you can get their comps and look at those versus what you've established as your comps and see what are the differences, what are the similarities. Is there a medium point that they might agree with you on? And then if you do agree to it and they agree in writing and they send you an email or something that says, hey, we agreed to this in writing, is it okay if I present it to the board? I, at that point, feel comfortable letting them present it to the board, or you can still say, I'm going to show up to the hearing just to make sure this goes through. Okay, so the burden of proof is on the assessor's office. So they have to prove that their value is based in fact. So when you're establishing your argument, you're both finding your own comps, and then when you ask for their comps, you can also look at their comps and see if something's incorrect about their comps. So appraisers are humans too. Every now and then they might make mistakes on their comps. There are also a lot of appraisers who, if you've got some good arguments and you tell them your arguments ahead of time and you give them your comps and they say, you know what, this house is pretty similar, they might put that into their own comps and incorporate them that way, and then you might be able to work out an agreement with them. So if you're going to an in-person hearing, we do not know whether that will happen. If you're going to an in-person hearing, we recommend that you bring 5 copies of all the evidence. It's annoying, but 5 copies. That way, every person in the Board of Equalization, the 3, can get a copy. The appraiser can get a copy, and then you can also have a copy. So that's just the safest way to do it. As we mentioned, the outcome of the hearing is frozen for 3 years. So let's say you appeal the 2020 value, it'd be frozen for 2020, 2021, and 2022. Okay, and here's what the decision looks like. They will tell you the amount of the 100% appraisal and also the 40% assessed. So if you want to, you can always, multiply the 40% assessed by the millage rates that might happen and get an idea early on about what your tax bill might end up looking like. And so if you go in person to this, they'll give you a copy of this. So you should go home with one of these, right, Stacy? Yeah.
Yes.
And you'll see they signed it at the bottom, and usually their comments really are just based on evidence presented. It's usually not more detailed than that. Okay. And then you can appeal it to Superior Court. And I believe that if you do appeal it, you don't have to pay filing fees. Am I correct, Stacy?
No, but the filing fee is only $25. So
there you go.
It's not a huge filing fee, but you do have to pay that. And the initial step is actually a settlement conference with the appraiser. So I don't think you have to file the filing fee before that, but I'm not sure. You want to be sure to confirm that before you, within that 30 days that you appeal it. Do we have other questions on the appeal process?
None right now.
Okay. So let me just real quickly say why you need to pay your taxes, because you don't want to lose the home, and it gets a lot more expensive the farther down the process you go. When the taxes are due, after that deadline, they're delinquent. And once they're delinquent, then you start adding interest and penalties. After 30 days, they can issue a lien, which they call a FIFE, it's Latin for lien, basically. In Fulton County, if you don't have a senior exemption, then Fulton County often will sell those liens to third parties. But whether it's a third party that holds the lien or if it's still the county, then whoever holds the lien, if you don't pay it off, they can actually do the foreclosure process. And the first step of that is a levy, and that's basically just a notice process. You know, if you're having your car repossessed, they come and take your car and take it somewhere to auction it off. They can't come and take your house in the same way. So they do a levy that makes it known that they're in the process of going through this foreclosure process, and they're effectively seizing your house to be able to auction it off. The auction will happen on the first Tuesday of the month on the courthouse steps in the same way that the mortgage foreclosure happens. The big difference is that the purchaser at a tax foreclosure only gets the title subject to your right to redeem. So basically you have the right to buy the house back, but it becomes a lot more expensive at this point. You know, with the levy, you already have sheriff's fees and things added in. By the time you get the tax foreclosure, the tax liens have been paid off, all that stuff has been taken care of. But in order to buy the house back, you have to pay the full purchase price plus 20% of the purchase price for the first year. And then every anniversary, it goes up another 10%. And so what that means is that people bid up these properties because they're going to be guaranteed either the property or a pretty good return on their money. So if your house, you know, if you say you owed $1,000 in taxes, but somebody bids $100,000 on the courthouse steps, then you actually have to turn around and pay them $120,000 to get your house back. That's, you know, if you can't pay the $1,000 in taxes, how are you going to pay the $120,000? So it becomes very hard. And then the following year, on the anniversary, it goes up to $130,000 and then $140,000. And so, you know, each year it gets more and more expensive. Now you do have the right to redeem up until they foreclose that right to redeem. So it could go on for decades, or it could go on just 1 year. They have to give you at least 1 year. In order to foreclose the right to redeem, all they have to do is do a notice process where you get served with notice saying that, or the property gets served with notice saying that there's a deadline for paying that redemption amount. And if you don't meet that deadline, then you've lost the right to buy that house back. Now you do have the right to possession up until they foreclose the right to redeem, but after that they can have you evicted. So again, pay the taxes. Don't let it get to this point because it just gets so much more expensive. You know, we're trying to give you tools to be able to try and keep those taxes low if at all possible. You know, find a way to be able to save the money. I know it's hard because you can't pay the taxes in installments if you don't have a mortgage. But, you know, find a way to try and set aside that money to save it to be able to pay the taxes when they come due, and try and, you know, stay out of these problems. Okay, any more questions now?
I don't see any coming through. If we just give it a couple seconds. And I'll just say thank you for everyone for joining us tonight, and thank you, Stacy and Carrie, for this great information. And again, we'll be sending out the recording, the presentation, and some of these helpful links probably tomorrow morning. And then also we will be sending out a link to register for some one-on-one consultations with volunteers. That will be in tomorrow morning's email as well. So stay tuned for more information about that. And definitely call us or email us if you have any other questions that weren't answered tonight.
I provided my contact information as well as the sort of general intake information for if you want to apply for services from Atlanta Legal Aid. It's all here. So hopefully we can help.
Perfect. And then everyone should have my email that registered in case anyone needs anything or connections with the presenters. And it looks like we don't have any more questions. So thank you all again. And thank you, Stacy and Carrie. Great information.
Thank you for attending.
Everyone have a great evening.
Thanks, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and end the Facebook feed now, if that's okay.
That's okay.
All right, it's just us.
John, you can end the meeting if you want. You have the power.
We went a little bit long, sorry.